When did you start regretting that you used to laugh at tarot readings and never took them seriously? I never believed in tarot cards, not seriously. Anyway, maybe as a party trick, or something you're slightly eccentric and did after too many glasses of wine on New Year's Eve. But not as something real, not something that could actually reach into your life and pull things apart. I used to roll my eyes when people talked about energies or the universe sending signs. That was the kind of language I'd hear from Instagram influencers, or spiritual YouTube channels, abstract, glittery, detached from the hard edges of real life. And my life, especially then, was very real to real. That's what makes this so hard to talk about, because I can't explain what happened without sounding completely unhinged. And yet, it happened. Or at least, I believe it did. Which maybe makes all the difference. I'm not looking for sympathy or even advice. If you think this is bullshit, that's totally fair. I would have thought the same thing 2 years ago. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I just need to write this because it won't leave me alone. My life started falling apart about 18 months ago. No single explosion, just cracks, hairline fractures at first, then spreading. You know how people talk about bad luck coming in threes? Mine came in a dozen, slow and surgical. My daughter, Lucy, started getting sick. First it was small things. Stomach aches, headaches, days when she just wanted to sleep. Then more serious symptoms. More hospital visits, no clear answers. Watching your child suffer is a special kind of helplessness. Like drowning while standing on land. Then my wife left. She said she couldn't do this anymore, that she felt like a ghost in our house. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. Maybe I was a ghost, too. I was barely holding things together. Emotionally, financially, spiritually. If there's such a thing as a rock bottom that keeps going, I found it. That's when I remembered my grandmother. She passed away when I was a teenager. But she used to talk about tarot, the moon, the other side. I never took it seriously. She once told me, "The universe whispers before it screams." I laughed. She didn't. And maybe that sentence got stuck somewhere in my brain because one night, sitting in my car outside the hospital, watching my own reflection in the rearview mirror and wondering if this was it, if this was just life now, I looked up a tarot reader. I don't know why. Not really. I just wanted someone to tell me that this wasn't permanent, that it could get better, that there was still a chance I wasn't stuck in some horrible alternate version of my own story. The woman I found didn't advertise much. No neon signs, no Instagram posts, just a name passed from one person to another like a secret. I messaged her. She responded with a single line, "Come when you're ready. I don't chase the lost." That should have been my first warning. But I wasn't looking for warnings. I was looking for hope. And what I found instead? Well, that's the part I still don't understand. That's what brought me here, writing this post with trembling hands at 3:41 in the morning, half afraid of what I'll see if I draw another card. So here it is, the story of how one tarot reading cracked open my reality, and how the pieces have never quite fit back together since. Before everything went sideways, my life was painfully average. I had a job I didn't hate, a modest house in a sleepy suburb, a wife I loved even if we'd grown a little quiet around each other, and a daughter who meant more to me than anything in the world. No big drama, no wild ambitions, just the soft hum of daily life. Wake up, coffee, commute, meetings, dinner, bedtime stories. Looking back, it's almost like a dream I once had. A warm, boring dream. The first shift came quietly. Lucy, my daughter, started complaining about fatigue. At first we chalked it up to school stress, maybe a virus, kids get sick, right? But it didn't go away. She would sleep for hours and still wake up tired. Her appetite faded. Then the fever started, low grade at first, then spiking suddenly. And for no apparent reason, we took her to the pediatrician, who ran blood work, then more blood work. Words like autoimmune, rare, and further testing became a regular part of our vocabulary. I saw the concern etched into the doctor's face even when he tried to smile. I knew what we're not sure yet really meant. It meant this could be bad. My wife, Erin, tried to hold it together. She stayed strong in the way people do when they're afraid of falling apart. Lists, routines, control. But there was a kind of slow corrosion happening between us it's hard to describe. Like trying to hold a conversation through bulletproof glass. She stopped looking me in the eye. I stopped asking how she was, and then one day, she didn't come home. Just a text that said, "I'm so sorry. I can't do this anymore." I sat on the kitchen floor for an hour, staring at the screen, not crying, not angry, just hollow. Like someone had cut out the middle of my chest, left the edges raw. I wasn't angry at her. That's the worst part. I knew exactly what she meant. I couldn't do this either, but I didn't have a choice. Lucy needed me. And no matter how much I was breaking inside, I had to keep pretending like I was whole. Bills piled up. My work performance tanked. I almost got fired twice in the span of 3 months. I stopped answering friends' texts. I couldn't remember the last time I laughed without immediately feeling guilty. Afterward, guilt became my default emotion. For not being enough, for not doing enough, for feeling anything at all. Some nights I would drive to the hospital parking lot and just sit there long after visiting hours. Headlights off, windows down, breathing in the cold night air like it might wash something out of me. Like maybe, if I sat still long enough, I'd hear some divine whisper. Some cosmic assurance that everything would be okay, but all I ever heard was the wind. And my own heartbeat, loud in the silence. It's funny, in that kind of desperation. Even the things you used to mock start to feel like possibilities. That's when my grandmother's voice came back to me. She used to talk about signs and energies and listening to the other side. She had tarot decks, crystals, dream journals. She wasn't some cartoonish witch. She was kind, sharp, and deeply intuitive, but also strange. She said odd things. At dinner, she believed the universe had threads, and if you knew how to look, you could see them shift out. As a kid, I dismissed it as harmless eccentricity. But now, I didn't know. I wanted to believe that there was something deeper beneath all this suffering, that it wasn't just chaos, that someone or something was keeping track of it all, and maybe, just maybe, it still had a plan for me. So one night, on a whim, I started searching tarot reader near me. Most were hokey, websites with glittery stars and vague promises of love and light. But one listing stood out. No address, just a name, Maris, and a simple, text-only page. You already know why you're here. I don't do love readings. I don't do entertainment. I read what's there, whether you want to see it or not. There was a phone number. I hesitated, then I dialed. No answer, just a voicemail. If you need a show, go to a stage. If you need truth, come in silence. I didn't leave a message. But the next morning, I got a text. No greeting, no name, just, come Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Bring nothing, and be sure you want to know. It felt scripted, creepy, maybe. But I'd already made the decision, deep down. I think I'd made it weeks earlier. I wanted answers. I wanted anything. I just didn't realize what I was inviting in. Her place was nothing like I imagined. It wasn't some dark, candlelit room with smoke curling around velvet drapes or crystals dangling from the ceiling. It was a regular house in a quiet neighborhood, halfway hidden behind an overgrown hedge. No sign out front, no hint that anything unusual went on inside. Just a cracked stone walkway and a door painted in fading blue. I sat in the car for a few minutes before going in, trying to convince myself it was okay to leave, that this was ridiculous, that I didn't actually believe a stranger could tell me anything I didn't already know. But there was a pressure in my chest that wouldn't ease until I stepped out. The door opened before I even knocked. She was older than I expected, but not ancient. Not warm exactly, but not cold either. Her presence had a kind of weight to it, like she carried gravity around with her. There was nothing performative about her. No headscarf, no rings, no long fingernails. Just a worn cardigan and the kind of face you stop trying to guess the age of, because it already looks like it's seen more than it should. Inside, the house was silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence you only notice in old churches, or places where something's ended. The air had that faint metallic tang, like it had been still for a long time. Nothing out of place, clean, sparse, no incense. No flickering candles, no smell of sage. Just a small table in the corner and a deck of cards already waiting, face down. She gestured for me to sit, and that was it. No ceremony, no questions, no pleasantries. She laid the cards out one by one, slowly, like each one had weight. I didn't recognize most of them. A tower struck by lightning, a woman blindfolded with swords at her sides, a skeleton on a horse. They were strange and grim and beautiful in a way I didn't expect. I waited for her to speak, but she didn't, not at first. She just looked at them like they were maps only she could read. And then, she began to talk. I won't get into every detail. Some things I still don't understand, and others I'm not ready to revisit. But what shook me was how accurate she was. Not just general personality traits or vague statements, but details. Specific, invasive knowledge about things no one could have known. Things I hadn't said out loud to anyone. She described the feeling I had sitting in my car that night. The image that had passed through my mind when I read her message, a memory from my childhood I hadn't thought of in years. She spoke about my daughter, not just that she was sick, but the way she clutched her stuffed rabbit when she was scared, the mole behind her left ear. The way she twisted her hair when she lied about how she was feeling. She spoke about Aaron, too. How long she'd been gone. But more than that, how long she'd been drifting away before she ever walked out the door. She described the drawer she'd emptied before she left. The sweater I found curled on the bathroom floor like shed skin. It felt like standing naked in front of someone who wasn't even looking at you. Like she was reading the shape of your shadow instead. At first, I was stunned. Then I started to feel sick. Not physically, not exactly. More like my brain was trying to push back against something. It couldn't hold off, a pressure behind the eyes, like when you realize too late that you've looked at something you were never meant to see. And then she talked about the past. Not just my past, but something behind it. Something that felt older. She spoke of patterns, not events, but repetitions. The way certain shapes move through bloodlines like echoes that never fade. She said that some families carry weight not of their own making. That mine had been. Marked, not cursed exactly, but burdened. Carriers of silence, she called it. A thread of grief passed down like a name. It was nonsense, except it wasn't. I thought about my grandmother, her cryptic phrases, her dreams she never explained. I thought about my own mother, who stopped talking to me when I dropped out of grad school to take care of Lucy full-time. About the way people in my family never talked about anything directly. Just let things rock quietly behind polite smiles, and then she moved to the future. She warned of something, again, not with direct words. She never said your daughter will die or you will lose everything. But the implication was there, that something was coming, that a choice would be made, or missed, and that I wouldn't see it for what it was until it was too late. She used metaphors that made my skin crawl, about doors closing before the key is found, about birds flying into windows, about fire without. Smoke. The last card she turned was one I'd seen earlier in the spread. The same skeleton on horseback, but this time she stared at it longer, her expression unreadable. Then she simply gathered the cards, placed them back into the deck, and stood. That was it. I left without saying much. The drive home was a blur. My hands were shaking, my mouth was dry. I kept telling myself it was a trick, a performance, maybe some elaborate psychological fishing. Cold reading techniques. Maybe she Googled me, found something online. Maybe. I wanted to believe, and she picked up on it, but none of those explanations fit. It didn't feel like being manipulated. It felt like being uncovered. And the worst part, the part that stuck with me long after I closed the door to my house, turned on every light, and sat in silence on my couch, was this simple. Terrible thought. What if she was right? Because, deep down, as much as I tried to shake it, I knew something had shifted. Like the air pressure had changed, like a clock I hadn't heard before had started ticking. In the following days, the world around me began to lean into that possibility. Slowly at first thought, then all at once. For the first few days after the reading, I told myself it was nothing, just a performance. A carefully crafted illusion wrapped in poetic language and vague, spooky metaphors. I repeated that idea like a prayer, over and over, as if saying it often enough would make it true. I went back to work. I drove Lucy to her appointments. I replied to emails. I tried to let the reading slip away like a strange dream. Something intense and vivid, but ultimately meaningless, but it didn't dot it. Clung to me. Not loudly, not all at once, more like static in the background of my thoughts. A sense that something invisible had turned its head in my direction and was now watching. It started with small things, a voicemail from a hospital billing department. That mentioned a code I'd just seen the tarot reader write down. A strange noise in the pipes at night that sounded like whispering just once, just for a second. Then Lucy started waking up in the middle of the night again, not crying, just sitting upright in bed staring toward the corner of the room. Like she was waiting for something. The real shift happened 5 days after the reading. That morning, a small bird flew straight into my living room window. I heard the thud, went to look, and there it was, a Fincher sparrow, maybe, limp on the ground. Its wings slightly open. I stared at it for a long time, way longer than made sense. I remembered the image from the cards. One of them had birds trapped behind swords. Wings spread, but nowhere to go. The kind of connection you only make when your brain is already trying to draw lines between everything. I told myself it was just coincidence, but I felt something break open in my stomach. That slow, crawling fear you get when you realize you're not just imagining something, that it's imagining you back. Still, I fought it. I looked up cold reading techniques. I read articles about how people give away more than they realize. Body language, tone of voice, little tells. I searched through forums full of skeptics who had been blown away by psychics only to later debunk it all through reason and logic. I tried to tell myself I was just vulnerable, that the pain I was carrying had made me desperate for answers. And desperate people are easy to manipulate. And yet, the moments kept piling up. That week, I lost out on a promotion at work. Not a surprise considering how little focus I'd had lately. But what threw me was the wording in the email. Something about this just doesn't feel aligned right now. Aligned. The same word the tarot reader had used when describing an upcoming opportunity that would miss alignment another day. I caught a reflection in the kitchen window that looked like someone standing behind me, just for a blink. But when I turned, nothing was there. The logical part of me said stress, sleep deprivation, but the logical part was getting quieter. I found myself thinking more and more about the reading, replaying it in my head, not just what she said, but how she said it, the tone, the pauses, the way she looked at me during that last card. I kept wondering whether she'd meant something she hadn't said out loud, whether she knew what was coming and had simply chosen not to spell it out. Then I remembered something she hadn't said but implied, that some things are inevitable, that knowing about them doesn't change the outcome. I started reading about determinism, prophecy, self-fulfilling beliefs, anything I could find that would make sense of what I was experiencing without resorting to superstition. I wanted to believe I was just internalizing her words and seeing their reflection everywhere, the kind of psychological projection. I wanted to believe I was the architect of my own delusion. Because if it wasn't that, then it meant something much worse. I didn't tell anyone. Not about the reading, not about the bird, not about the sense of invisible tension building in my house like a pressure drop before a storm. People were already worried about me. I become quieter, more withdrawn. I stopped reaching out to coworkers. I avoided calls from friends. Even my sister texted to ask if I was okay, and I lied, telling her everything was fine, just tired, just busy, just a little off. What I didn't say was that I'd started to feel like I was inside a script I hadn't written, a series of scenes I recognized only after they'd played out. And that maybe the worst part wasn't what I'd heard during the reading. The worst part was what she didn't say, what she left unsaid, what was still coming. It didn't happen all at once. There was no sudden snap, no dramatic collapse, just a slow drift. A steady erosion of whatever thin boundary had still existed between curiosity and obsession. The tarot reading had left a splinter in my mind, and instead of pulling it out, I started digging around it. I told myself I was looking for truth, for perspective, but I wasn't. I was looking for control. I ordered a tarot deck online. It arrived 3 days later in an unmarked envelope, just a small box, matte black. No instructions. I opened it late at night after Lucy had gone to sleep. I laid the cards out on my kitchen table and stared at them for hours. I didn't even shuffle at first, just looked. The images felt familiar, like they'd always been somewhere in the back of my mind. Eventually, I started pulling cards. At first once a day, in the morning, then twice, then before bed, and again if something unusual happened. A strange text, a missed call, a flicker of light at the edge of my vision. It was like trying to track the weather in a language I barely understood. The more I read, the more I found meanings layered on top of meanings. I started keeping a journal, every card, every combination, every gut feeling that came with it. I watched videos, read forums, bought books that used phrases like archetypal resonance and energetic convergence. I told myself I was learning, but I wasn't. I was feeding something. It was hungry. The more I read, the more I started to see patterns. Repeating numbers to 333, 1111 started appearing on clocks. On receipts, in appointment times, birds kept showing up, crows especially. I'd never paid attention to birds before, but now they were everywhere. One followed me home from the store one afternoon, hopping from tree to tree, watching. That's how far gone I was. I genuinely believed a bird was watching me, but at the time, it didn't feel ridiculous. It felt like the world was speaking, like something underneath reality was beginning to break through the surface. I stopped brushing these things off. Instead, I started writing them down, cataloging them like a scientist documenting phenomena no one else could see. There was a night when I dreamed about a card I hadn't drawn yet, the hangman. The image burned into my sleep like static. When I woke up, I felt physically sick. I shuffled my deck. First card I drew was the hangman. I told myself it was just probability, 1 in 78, but my hands were still shaking. I became more withdrawn. I let calls go to voicemail. I ignored emails. I'd sit in Lucy's hospital room scrolling through forums, where people talked about psychic awakenings, shadow work, curses, past lives. I knew I should be focused on her, on being present for my daughter, but part of me had begun to feel like this was connected to her too, like her illness wasn't just medical, like there was something else sitting beside her bed that I couldn't see. She started drawing pictures again, which she hadn't done in months, but the drawings were strange: eyes with no faces, trees without roots, blackbirds flying toward a red sky. Once, she drew a figure standing outside our house, faceless, arms too long. I asked her who it was supposed to be, and she just shrugged and said he's waiting. That night I slept with the lights on. For the first time in years, I stopped using the microwave. I stopped looking at my reflection at night. I started turning all the mirrors in the house to face the walls. I knew it didn't make sense, but I felt watched constantly, not by someone, by something. A kind of pressure in the air. I'd walk into a room and feel like someone had just left it a moment before. And yet, I kept pulling cards, even when I promised myself I'd WOULD in single quotes T. It became ritual, habit, a drug. I kept hoping for clarity, for some message that would tell me what to do, how to make it stop. But the cards only got more cryptic, repeating suits, symbols that started to bleed into my real life. A rusted crown on the sidewalk, a coin eye found in Lucy's bed, shaped like the ones on the cards. I dreamed of staircases that never ended. I heard static when I turned the TV on, even when it was playing normally, just for a moment. Just under the sound. At some point I stopped thinking the reading had predicted anything. I started wondering if it had opened something, like a door or a channel, and if something had come through. I had no idea how to send it back. I remembered what the reader had said, or rather, what she had not said. The way she had looked at that final card, the way she had seemed distant after, like she didn't want to know what would happen next either. I began to wonder if the cards weren't just showing me possibilities, maybe they were shaping them. Like every time I pulled a card, I wasn't seeing the future. I was creating it, or worse, aligning to it, fixing myself to a path that couldn't be undone. I tried to stop once. I locked the deck in a drawer, told myself enough was enough. I made it a day and a half. Then Lucy's fever spiked. We were in there until 3 a.m. The doctor said it was nothing new, but it felt different. The nurse who took her temperature wore a necklace with the same symbol that had appeared in one of the spreads, an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail. I unlocked the drawer the next morning. The cards were still there, but they felt heavier. I think I knew, even then, that I wasn't in control anymore, that I'd crossed some invisible line, but I kept going. Not because I wanted answers anymore, but because I didn't know how to stop. Because the fear had become a kind of rhythm, familiar, addictive, and deep down, I had begun to accept something I couldn't yet say out loud. I was no longer the only presence in my own life. Eventually, I convinced myself I needed to go back, not for answers, not even for comfort, just confirmation. I needed to know that I wasn't losing my mind, or if I was. I needed someone to witness it with me, someone who could tell me whether this path I was on had an end, or if I was already walking off the edge. I didn't contact the same woman. I didn't even know if I could. I tried calling the number again weeks before, but it had been disconnected. I drove past the house once just to see if it was still there, but it looked empty, abandoned. No lights, no movement, not even a mailbox. I don't even know if it had ever been a real home. So I found someone else. This one came recommended through a tarot message board I had started lurking in late at night, where people talked about readings gone wrong in energy, signatures that don't want to be interpreted. Most of it read like fantasy. Except now, I wasn't so sure. The woman I saw the second time was different, younger, softer voice. Modern apartment, incense burning in a ceramic bowl shaped like a lotus. The setting was less intense, almost comforting, but the feeling, that charged air, that electric awareness was still there. I didn't tell her anything. I didn't have to. The reading started slow. Harmless cards, internal conflicts, root chakra imbalance, vague references to past pain. I nodded politely, trying to suppress the buzzing in my ears. Then something shifted. She pulled a series of cards that made her stop mid-movement. Her hands froze above the table. She stared down in silence, and I watched the expression drain from her face. Not fear exactly, but something close. She began speaking more cautiously. She talked about something being with me, though she didn't say what. A presence. Not necessarily evil, but not benevolent either. Something watching. Something that had been watching for a long time. She said there was resistance in the cards. Like they didn't want to open all the way, as if something in the space had its own agenda. That I wasn't just asking questions, I was inviting something through. Then she mentioned echoes. That word hit me hard. It was the same word the first reader had used, not directly, but close enough. Patterns, cycles. Shadows that travel down generations. Things that don't belong to us but live through us. She said there are moments in a reading when the energy doesn't just reflect the present, it clings to the future, warping it. I asked, silently. In my head, if it was too late, she looked up like she'd heard the question out loud. She didn't answer. She simply began gathering the cards, one by one, as if something had told her the reading was over. But I knew better. It hadn't ended. It had refused to go further. There was something in that moment that felt like rejection, like the cards themselves, or something behind them, had seen enough of me and didn't want to reveal anymore. Or worse, couldn't without letting something else in. She burned something in a bowl. Said it was for cleansing. The smoke made me dizzy. My vision blurred around the edges like a fever dream. I left without saying much, same as before, only this time, I didn't feel stunned or confused. I felt followed, like something had gotten up from the table with me and walked out behind me. That night I didn't sleep, not even a little. Every sound in the house felt sharp and deliberate. The ticking of the clock sounded wrong, inconsistent, like a heartbeat. I thought I saw movement in the hallway mirror, just outside my bedroom door. I turned it to face the wall again. Lucy started mumbling in her sleep. Not words, just soft, broken sounds, like she was whispering to someone or something. I didn't touch the tarot deck for 2 days after that. It sat in the drawer like a trap waiting to be triggered. But on the third day, I pulled a single card, not shuffled, not prepared. I just opened the drawer, cut the deck, and turned the top one. It was the card from my dream again. The Hangman. Again. I remember staring at it and thinking, this isn't random anymore. This isn't even spiritual. This is mechanical. Something is happening on a level I don't understand. Something is moving beneath the surface of my choices. Adjusting, correcting, feeding. I started to think that maybe none of this was about me at all. Maybe I'd just been near something that was never meant to be touched. And now it wouldn't let go. After that second reading, something inside me broke. Not like a clean snap. More like an old beam that had been straining for years and finally gave way with a groan. So deep it echoed through the rest of the house. Things didn't just feel off anymore. They felt wrong, inconsistent, shifted. Like someone had quietly rewritten the rules of the world while I was sleeping. Time started behaving strangely. I'd look at the clock and hours would be gone. Other times, it felt like minutes, stretched endlessly, like I was stuck between ticks. I'd go to make coffee, look out the window, and then it would be dark. I'd reread the same paragraph in an email 3 times and realize it had different wording each time. Or maybe I was just remembering it wrong. Objects moved. I thought I was imagining it at first. The TV remote not where I left it, the fridge light, flickering when it had never done that before. Then one day, I found a small wooden figure on my nightstand, a shape I didn't recognize, carved, weathered. I lived alone with my daughter, and she hadn't been in my room. I threw it away. It showed up again 2 days later in a drawer I hadn't opened in weeks. Lucy started talking in her sleep more often, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, a flat, rhythmic sound that didn't sound like her at all. I asked her once what she dreamed about. She said she didn't remember, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine when she said it. Then there were the shadows. They didn't behave the way they were supposed to. One night, I was in the hallway and saw a shadow cross behind me on the wall, but no one had passed. The house was still. Another time, I turned off the living room light and saw what looked like fingers curl around the edge of the doorway in the dark, only to vanish when I turned it back on. I began waking up at exactly 3:13 a.m., heart pounding, ears ringing. No noise, no dream, just this visceral sense of being observed. Like something was waiting for me to acknowledge it. I stopped drawing tarot cards. I didn't need to. The symbols had bled out of the deck and into my waking life. I saw them in graffiti, in magazine covers, in the shapes of clouds, in cracks on the sidewalk. Once I saw the Wheel of Fortune painted on the side of a dumpster in an alleyway I'd never walked through before. Same colors, same layout. I stood staring at it for 10 full minutes, unable to breathe. I knew I was slipping. I could feel it. The rational part of me, what was left of it, tried to push back. I considered seeing a therapist, but I couldn't imagine explaining this in a way that didn't sound like pure delusion. One researched schizophrenia, psychosis, dissociation. I considered the possibility that this was some kind of prolonged breakdown triggered by trauma. I wanted that to be true. I would have welcomed it. A chemical imbalance I could treat, a name I could put on this thing. But every time I reached the edge of disbelief, something else would happen. Something just coherent enough, just specific enough to pull me back in. One afternoon, Lucy pointed at a photo of my grandmother and said, very calmly, that she saw her standing at the foot of her bed the night before. That shouldn't have rattled me. Children say strange things, but she had never seen a picture of her before, not once. The photo had been in a drawer. It wasn't framed. I hadn't even thought of it in years. Another day. The power in the house went out, nothing unusual about that, except it was isolated. Our neighbors had lights, the street lights were on, but our house went completely dead. It lasted for 13 minutes, exactly. I know because I timed it on my phone when it came back. All the clocks were flashing except for the microwave, which had reset itself to 3:13. I didn't sleep that night. There was a sound in the hallway, a dragging sound like fabric or rope being pulled across the floor. When I opened the door, nothing was there, but the picture frames were all tilted to one side. Lucy began whispering to someone when she was alone. I watched through the crack in the door once just to make sure she wasn't talking to herself. But her posture, it was different, like she was listening, responding, obeying. I couldn't hear what she was saying. I didn't want to. I stopped going outside. I called into work sick and never called back. Food lost its taste. The days all felt the same, heavy, static charged, expectant, like we were living under a sky that had forgotten how to let go of a storm. I started to think the house was breathing. Some mornings, the air inside felt thicker, warmer, as if it had exhaled while I slept. I started taping paper over the mirrors. I unplugged the TV. I stopped checking the mail. Every piece I opened had some words circled or underlined, even if I hadn't marked it myself. I dreamed of corridors that bent in impossible directions. I woke up with bruises on my thighs and wrists that I didn't remember getting, I thought. I heard a voice say my name from inside the walls, not whispering, but low, flat, like the voice of someone narrating a memory they didn't want to relive, and still, I held it together, at least on the outside. I cooked, I cleaned, I smiled when Lucy was awake. I told myself all of this was in my head, that none of it was real, but the truth was simple and more terrifying than anything else. Whether it was in my head or not, it was here. It had arrived. It was inside the house, inside my thoughts. Inside the spaces between seconds, I could feel it stretching, growing roots. Watching from the margins. Something had stepped through, and I didn't know how to make it leave. There wasn't a single moment where everything snapped. It was more like a slow-motion avalanche. Months of silence and symbols, dreams and dread, finally gaining momentum until the weight of it all became unbearable. I didn't realize how close I was to the edge until I stepped off, and by then, there was nothing underneath me but air. It happened on a Sunday. I remember because I used to count Sundays. They were the only day Lucy didn't have appointments. The one day we could pretend things were normal. Cartoons in the morning, pancakes, soft pajamas, and blanket forts. That Sunday, I'd promised her we'd paint together. Something small, something light, but I never got to the painting. That morning, when I came downstairs, every light in the kitchen was on. The back door was unlocked. The deck was wet, but it hadn't rained. Lucy was sitting at the table, barefoot, still in her pajamas. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her like she was waiting for someone. She looked up at me and smiled, but it wasn't right. It wasn't her smile. It was too still, too symmetrical. She told me, in a tone that didn't sound like her voice, that the house had been visited in the night. I asked by who. She didn't answer, just turned her head toward the window like she expected something to be standing there. That was when I felt it. That presence, the one I'd been denying, rationalizing, avoiding, it was real. It filled the room like smoke, thick and invisible, pressing on my skin. I didn't see anything, but I didn't need to. It was in the corners, behind the curtains, in the spaces. Between words. My chest tightened. My ears started to ring. My vision went blurry around the edges. Something was wrong. Not wrong like an accident or a mistake. Wrong like an ancient truth you've spent your whole life trying not to remember. I told Lucy to go upstairs and lock the door. She didn't move. I shouted. She flinched, slowly stood, and walked, not ran, out of the room, still to calm. Still not her. I was left alone with it. I didn't know what to do. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by humming appliances and buzzing light, and I thought, I can't do this anymore. Not the paranoia, not the signs, not the endless sense that I had stepped off the natural path of time and was now moving through something sideways and broken. I walked into the hallway and opened the drawer where I'd stashed the tarot deck. I didn't even shuffle. I just reached in and drew the first card I touched. Death. Of course. But it wasn't the card that broke me. It was what happened after. The air in the room shifted. Not a breeze, not a draft, but a drop, like pressure being sucked out. I could feel my ears pop. The lights flickered once, then again. And then I heard it. Not a sound, a voice. But not like speaking, more like remembering, inside my head, not with words, but with meaning. It said, "This was never yours to carry." I dropped the card, it fluttered to the floor and landed face down. The moment it hit, the lights snapped off. The whole house went dark. No noise, no hum, just stillness and something else. Breathing. Not mine, not Lucy's, something low, rhythmic, coming from the walls. I couldn't move. Every part of me had locked up. My body had turned to concrete. I heard footsteps upstairs, but not hers. Heavier, slower. And then silence again. I don't remember falling Only the sound of my own voice screaming something I couldn't understand. Not words, just sound, as if something inside me had been turned inside out. I felt pressure in my head, heat behind my eyes, nausea crawling up my throat. My limbs were shaking, my vision was gone. Just blackness and a white hot buzzing like a scream made of electricity. And then light. The lights came back on. Everything looked normal. The card was still on the floor, still face down. I picked it up. It wasn't death anymore. It was the Fool, the card that begins the tarot. The first step, a man walking off a cliff, smiling, unaware. I dropped it again. I ran upstairs. Lucy was asleep in her bed, asleep, not unconscious, breathing normally. The room smelled like burnt matches. That night, I took the tarot deck outside and burned it in the fire pit behind the garage. I watched every card curl and blacken, the images disappearing one by one. It smelled like oil. The flames burned hot, fast. It didn't matter. I knew it was too late. It was never about the cards. The cards were just the invitation, the permission. Something else had been waiting, and I had opened the door. It'd been 7 months since that night, 7 months since I burned the deck, since the lights died, since I heard something breathing that wasn't me, since my daughter looked at me with a smile that didn't belong to her. Nothing big has happened since then, not like before. No more collapsing timelines or shadow figures or clocks freezing at 3:13. But that doesn't mean it's over. The silence that came after. It's worse in a different way. It's like living inside an echo chamber, where every sound you make just circles back to remind you you're still inside. I've stopped talking to most people. Some drifted away on their own, others I pushed. I couldn't keep up the performance. Couldn't pretend I was fine when my whole nervous system still tensed up every time. I saw a deck of cards in a bookstore window. I couldn't make small talk while wondering if the shadows on the wall were cast by the sun or by something else entirely. Lucy's better, at least. That's what the doctors say. She still gets tired easily. Still has days where she barely wants to speak, but the fevers have stopped. Her numbers are stable. She smiles more now, her real smile, not the one from that morning in the kitchen. But sometimes I catch her staring at something just past my shoulder, her eyes unfocused, her mouth slightly open, and I wonder if it ever really left her, or if it just shifted, changed shape. Found a better hiding place. The house is quiet now. I keep it clean, orderly, as if keeping the physical space controlled might hold the other parts together too. I haven't touched a tarot deck since the night I burned mine. I avoid anything, even adjacent, books, crystals, symbols, anything that might pull something through again. But the patterns still come, the repeating numbers, the flickers of déjà vu, the dreams. I still wake up some nights gasping, heart hammering, convinced something's at the end of the hallway. I check every time. There's nothing there. I tell myself I'm healing, that I'm grounded now. But the truth is, I just don't look in. Mirrors after dark. I keep all the windows locked, even when it's hot. And I no longer believe in coincidence. There are still moments when I'll be walking through a grocery store or standing in line for coffee, and suddenly the air will shift again. I'll feel that pressure behind my eyes, the way it felt in the kitchen that morning, like something is testing the perimeter of my life, like it's checking to see if the door is open again. And I wonder, did I bring something back with me that day? Or did I just become aware of what was already there? I've stopped trying to make sense of it. There's no neat resolution, no clarity, no answer, and honestly, I'm not sure I'd want one even if it was offered to me. Some truths are heavy in a way the body isn't designed to carry. Some doors, once open, don't close all the way. People like to believe that knowledge is power. That understanding is healing. That if you can name a thing, you can control it. But what if naming it gives it shape? What if looking for answers is what feeds it? I don't know if I was cursed or haunted or just cracked wide open at the wrong moment. I don't know if the cards predicted what was going to happen or if they wrote the script the second I believed them. I don't even know if anything supernatural ever really happened, or if I just stared long into a mirror that showed me the pieces of my own mind. I wasn't meant to see Dot, but here's what I do know. I used to think life was random, chaotic, unwritten. Now I think the story is already there, and all we can do is decide whether we want to read ahead or not. There's something no one tells you about asking for the truth. You don't get to decide what kind of truth you receive. We think of insight as a gift, clarity, meaning, perspective, the things that are supposed to help us navigate this mess of a world. But clarity isn't always soft. Sometimes it scrapes, sometimes it blinds. Sometimes it tears the skin off the lie you needed to keep living. That's what the tarot did to me. It didn't give me hope. It didn't give me closure. It gave me the feeling of a key turning in a lock I didn't realize had been in my chest my entire life. And when it opened, something I couldn't name walked in. I think about that first reading often. Not the words. I barely remember the specific phrases now, but the feeling. That sense that someone was peeling me apart with their eyes and laying my life out, like a sequence of cards in perfect order. Not for interpretation, not even for understanding, just to witness. I used to wonder how she knew what she knew. Now, I wonder if she didn't know anything at all. Maybe she was just a mirror. Maybe I was the one holding all of it the entire time. The decay, the inevitability, the quiet little horror of knowing that nothing in my life had ever really been random. There are people who chase signs, people who go to psychics, who read horoscopes, who ask the universe for direction, and maybe that helps them. Maybe they find comfort in feeling guided, held, understood. But I don't. I used to want guidance. I used to think if I could just see ahead, I could avoid pain, that I could sidestep the next disaster. But all it did was show me the shape of something I couldn't escape. What I've learned, the only thing I've learned, is that knowing isn't freedom. It's weight. It's a chain disguised as insight. And once you've seen the thread, once you've watched the pattern click into place, you can't unsee it. You walk with it, every step, every hour, a little more aware than you should be. I still see the signs, I still feel the patterns, but now I keep my head down. I ignore the numbers on the clocks. I delete the dreams before they solidify in memory. I close the books. I don't look for messages in the wind or the static. Not because I don't believe in them, but because I do too much. People will say I let it get to me. That I let grief or stress or trauma eat holes in my perception. That I made something out of nothing. That I collapsed under the weight of my own imagination. Maybe they're right, but what if they're not? What if we're all walking a razor's edge, and some of us just happen to fall 1 inch too far to the side? What if some doors are always there, waiting, and most people never knock? And what if the only thing standing between our world and something else is not knowing it exists? Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I never picked up the cards. If I'd just driven past that house, if I'd deleted the message, if I'd never asked, maybe things would have still fallen apart. Maybe Lucy still would have gotten sick. Maybe Aaron still would have left. Maybe I would have still ended up right here, only without the extra weight of knowing why. Or maybe I'd still be sleeping through the nights, blissfully unaware, still believing in chance and luck and randomness. Still thinking I had agency. Still telling myself that the world is just a series of unrelated events, stitched together by time and memory. Still free, but I did ask, and I did see, and now I carry it. Every day. I don't know if the story is over. Maybe nothing really happened. Maybe it was all psychological. Maybe it was something else. Or maybe that's what it wants, to be doubted, dismissed, diminished. Maybe that's how it survives. I'm writing this not for answers, and not as a warning either, because if you're the kind of person who will knock on that door, nothing I say will stop you. But if you do, don't ask unless you're ready to know, because knowing is a price, and once it's paid, it never stops collecting.